I hope you're not thirsty. We got water for you. Yeah. You want to make a quick trip to the back before? Yeah.
You can see what I put us together. We both have.
Okay, thank you everyone and welcome to our second exhibition of Stephen Westfall's paintings, actually the third though that he's been involved with. Last season he organized for us a spectacular show in the same space called Planar Abstraction, which was
Planar Gardens.
Planar Garden, yes, which was about planar abstraction, and it included contemporaries of his, including, and then some historic figures like Arthur Dove, Stuart Davis, Alexander Calder, and others. So we are very thankful to the Brooklyn Rail and to Feng Bui and his team for sponsoring this conversation with Stephen Westfall, which will be available on the Rail website and on ours in a couple of days. And we are also grateful to Joan Waltemath. Waltemath. Yes, for moderating our conversation today. And Joan is an artist who lives and works here in New York, and she writes on art and has been an editor-at-large for the Rail since 2001. So thank you, and we'll turn it over to you two.
Thank you. Well, Stephen.
Joan.
Here we are. And it's like 40 years later.
What happened? A lot of things.
You've had a remarkable career. Oh my God, you've won many awards. You got the Rome Prize. I mean, my God, that's such an honor to get the Rome Prize. And you've had all these commissions for architectural works and sites. That's a really incredible thing. That's a big privilege. And you've been serving as contributing editor for Art in America for I don't know how long. I couldn't even find anything that went back that far. So you've definitely been you're there, published in Arts and Bomb and Flash Art and the Rail. So it's an honor to be here with you.
The honor is all mine. Joan is a wonderful painter, and she's also the director emeritus of the Hofberger School at MICA, and is just generally a brilliant person. So thank you for your interest. And I'm honored. The honor is all mine.
My pleasure. So by way of introduction, I just wanted to say a few words about the time and place of our respective lives. Stephen Westfall and I are born in the same year, so that's really special. For me, I don't know.
Yeah.
So like, we're the same generation.
You could have been born much later.
Well, years ago. We came up in New York at a time when the sun had set on Clement Greenberg's reign, thank God. And yet the term formalism, when applied to someone's work, still rather implied that there was no content apparent in it. So in our generation, we've struggled to transform that notion into an understanding of formal decision-making in painting as a means to deliver what's inherent in the painting to generations forward, and through a variety of means. So that's been a long journey. And when I came to look at your new paintings, what struck me in just walking around the room was how you've set your work in a very clear relationship to the important formal issues facing planar abstraction in our time. That's what I was thinking we would talk about today, because that's kind of something we really share in terms of both of our work. So I'm going to ask you about various aspects of your thinking on what you're doing formally in your paintings and how you see that, what you're up to, and also about your life, which in some sense is always a mystery, right?
All right, yes. Even now.
So let's start in the 80s. I wonder, in the 80s you were showing with Danny Newberg. Do you remember us meeting?
There are some aspects about the 80s I don't remember very well, but I remember an early studio studio visit to, when you were living in Chinatown.
Yeah, it's still.
And they're still there. Oh, wow. Yeah, lucky you. We shared concerns about formal abstraction, but you were smart and funny also, so it was an easy conversation. But we talked about difficult subjects, I think, and also what I remember 40-something years ago is we were all desperately poor, you know, and we were. So I remember the joint task of painting from a standpoint of optimism for painting in a politically and economically desperate time for us personally. You know, there was AIDS, there was, you know, we were suffering losses. I was, at the time, still mired in alcoholism, to be honest, and thankfully I've been sober for a very long time. All of that was in the mix, and I think it led to an attitude towards painting, for me, that was trying to reconcile the hope for beauty of a certain kind of entrance into a room that a painting could make, and times which seem to promote a certain kind of skepticism around anything hopeful that could be drawn from that, you know, what my senses were telling me. That this is a wonderful thing. No, there's no room for wonderful things right now. And it's funny that we've kind of circled back in this, you know, maybe from a standpoint of surviving, we're on a little more solid ground. But in terms, you know, personally, but you know, I feel much of the same kind of contradiction, incipient contradiction, and then how do paintings answer that in terms of abstraction is a big question, and the question is still very alive, I think.
You gotta face it every time you go in the studio.
Yeah. You face it with all the resources that one can muster, including music, memory. I think what Greenberg sort of seemed to posit for a lot of us, and he used, ironically, he used historical arguments to sort of set the stage, was that was a kind of formalism that didn't seem to reference memory in a certain level. That in terms of its immediate perceptual qualities, except the act itself, and that everything that had led up to that. And he would say, you know, well, you know, a Pollock has the same content as a Rubens, and of course, and you know, who are you going to believe? You know, Greenberg or your lying eyes? So we, you know, so the idea is you know, does a painting in the shroud of its color, in its embodiment, but its maybe lack of interest in large goddesses, still have a kind of follow-through of content, you know, that is actually there, and you know, I argue that it does, and it has to do with the culture of painting.
But it's hard to imagine how people could subscribe to that narrow idealism about the painting only referencing itself.
Yeah.
And how long that actually held sway, and also what I feel like what's really interesting in looking around our generation is understanding how everyone broke out of that. What were their interests? What were their sources? Which leads me to my next question for you is, I was wondering if you could talk about your sources and what really inspires you in your sources, and how that translates into your process. Do you feel like it's more like improvising, or do you feel yourself making conscious translations of things that you encounter?
There was a stretch, I guess would say, in the 90s and early aughts where I was referencing very specific things and sort of sealing them with the rectangle and making that subject the figure in such a way that it was still an abstract painting, but it could have been like, there was a painting I did called Look Around, which was these concentric rectangles that was inspired by a Hoffman rug from the Kunsthalle in Zurich, and you know, pulling it up so it's like the same, you know, it's in the rectangle, and then changing the color so it became something else. Like a color would evoke maybe the pigmentation of a Germantown Navajo rug or Stuart Davis. And my sense was that there was this cacophony of stuff trying to get into a painting. And even if I distilled it, and especially if I distilled it, it would still be there in a kind of muted, reticent way, but insistent. And that created a really interesting tension that to me was both sort of comic and abject at the same time. And that abjectness sort of goes all the way back to the grid paintings, which were twisted interstices, so the grid was no longer stable. It shimmied a little bit, and then it sort of broke down entirely. So I've been always thinking about how much is always clamoring to get into a painting. You know, for a painter with memory, I almost like looking at painting more than painting. You know, ideally there would be, I could bilocate like Padre Pio and like, you know, yeah, one part of me could be in a museum looking at painting while the other part, you know, while the other Steve is in the studio just painting away while listening to jazz or something. So
I can't believe that you mentioned Padre Pio. Padre Pio.
Big fan.
Oh my God, my mom went to see Padre Pio.
Oh no!
Yes, because he was a kind of Italian saint.
Yes.
Who had the stigmata, and people made pilgrimages to see Padre Pio.
And he's like the last confirmed by the Catholic Church, so take that with a 10-pound grain of salt, person to bilocate, that is to be in two places at once. That was one of his 3 consecrating miracles.
On that note, I'm curious about your drawings, and if you, like in making your paintings, if you're making specific kind of preparatory drawings, or if you see your drawings more autonomous, or can you describe how that relationship between painting and drawing works for you in your practice?
It's closer than it is for some people because my drawing really is painting, in the sense that my work on paper is mostly gouache and watercolor. I've made a few colored pencil drawings. I know there's 2 at Gallery Isola Clement in Bonn if you want to track them down. They're nice, but I'm not really a line person, I'm an edge person. So line and edge, so like an edge can be a line, or it can have a, you know, so line doesn't lift off and have its own identity for me apart from shape. And that's just part of the action of my work and my thinking. I think that has to do with my desire to make paintings and works on paper that directly address architecture. And that's you know, maybe we come round back to that. But let me say, I'm also not an idiot. That for in most cases, in almost all cases, there is a very thin pencil line that gets painted over, made with a straight edge. Because I'm not you know, nobody could do that without something. I don't use tape, except on the wall paintings, because that's crazy, and I don't do the wall paintings much anymore. I have. So it's all hand. But the great thing about painting up to the edge is that if you slop over, you can always paint the other plane and shave it down, you know. So basically you can't make a mistake. I've had assistants like throw down their brush, really nice people, and say, I can't do it. When I said, oh, make the first coat as a kind of what I thought was a gift, you know, like, oh, you can do it, you know, and go ahead. And like actually get the shakes, because they think in their mind that I'm somehow, I'm some sort of maestro of control. And it's, I'm not. I don't think you know, I drank too much coffee. So I'm like all over the place. But it gets done. It gets done. So the work on paper, much of it has its own identity. In some cases, there's springboards for paintings. And there was one. Is it in this show? Yes, there's one in this show that was, I think, that was a springboard for this painting, but then I changed colors around because I have to. It wasn't, things that work in wash don't work in oil sometimes. Things that work in a small scale, colors that work in a small scale don't work at a big scale. And you have, you know, so you find that, and I think a lot about scale.
I just want to say that maestro thing, it creeps up on you and you don't know it.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're like, your assistant can't paint those, but I'm looking at that, you know, and like, I don't know that I can do it either. So, there we are. You know, a minute ago you mentioned those early grids that you made that are skewed. And those, for me, it's fascinating to look at your trajectory and see how you moved from those skewed grids that had these implied triangles in them to basically triangular compositions. And I'm really curious how, if you could talk about what motivated you to move from an orthogonally oriented compositional structure to more of a dynamic, diagonal.
I think the desire for increased movement, that a diagonal line in a rectangle moves in a way that a vertical and horizontal line, even if it's just off its verticality or tilted off its horizontality, it doesn't have the same velocity. And then with that movement, I can induce an element that's really, I think, overlooked, but Frank Stella isolated it in his wonderful book, Working Space, rhythm. Like, you know, nobody talks about rhythm, you know, on a certain level. Except
One can't look at your paintings without thinking about rhythm.
Yeah, well, that's these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a time where maybe that wasn't a forward impression as much, and I think that's when the grid was more of a kind of fragile web. So you weren't thinking about the sort of the percussive nature of rhythm in the same way. I mean, one thing that it helps to understand about my process is that I'm synesthetic, and not only do I taste color or sometimes smell color, but I actually hear. I hear them. I hear the composition. I can feel like a little cymbal crash. I had an experience in Bonn once of hearing a Malevich with my back turned.
Oh my God.
And the hair like stood out on the back of my neck. And I don't know what that is. It's, you know, except that I'm challenged in many ways in terms of my normal, you know, a normative brain structure. I have mixed dominance, I'm dyslexic. I was in speech class for 2 years in elementary school. I learned how to speak in complete sentences by listening to comedy records. Bob Newhart, Nicholson May. So all of that has something to do, it's all in the paintings too, which is this kind of somewhat warped and somewhat overly enhanced sensorial relationship with the world around me. And maybe I need to, as an abstract artist, one of the calls is to essentialize it, so I get some kind of clarity, to find some kind of clarity while still finding play in all of that too. But it doesn't, like, memory doesn't drop out, you know. The memory is just a sensorially awake. Yes, yeah. So if I'm thinking about Picasso, for instance, it's like I'm looking at Picasso, even though there's not a Picasso in the room, or something like that.
Another thing that really occurred to me as I came up here when the show was installed, and I was walking around looking at your paintings, and I was thinking about this issue of frontality, which was such a big deal, like back in the 80s, right?
It's gotta be frontal.
I mean, people actually
Or go home. Go frontal or go home.
Like, nobody would talk about that today. I can't imagine. Anyway, when I was walking around looking at your paintings, and I started to, like, allow myself to see them from my peripheral vision, from oblique angles, I could feel like these pockets and slices of space opening up that you could actually enter, that were almost what I would call an inhabitable space where you could enter into them. And it felt like something that your work had been moving towards for quite a long time, that ability to sort of disrupt that plane and create these pockets where things fall away and something else opens up. But it's not like it's very, it's not like a landscape painting or something where you feel, oh, there's a foreground, middle ground, background. But I was thinking more of terms like slippage or the fold, especially like in these paintings. It's almost like there's a folding going on, and so in that action of folding, which was such a strong postmodern term, the space opens up. So, I'm wondering if that's something you're thinking about, if that's like something like an affect that's happening because of the rhythms that are in the paintings, or how you think about that.
I think the affect comes first, and then thinking about it comes second. Like it's an I observe it in the paintings, but a lot of the stuff just happens sort of improvisationally. Like what happens in this painting, Jitterbug Waltz, that black base of the blue, of sort of the blue triangles, is not black at all. It's the same blue carried over the orange by mistake. The blue over the orange goes to this really rich black, but it's very orangey for one thing. And it was so good, I couldn't wipe it down or paint it out. And so then the base becomes a facet, where a certain two-dimensionality was insistent, it's no longer insistent, even though it's also quasi-hard edge. Because all of a sudden there's this shadowed facet at the bottom on the bottom triangle, which you guys can observe at your leisure when we fold up the chairs.
This is really fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like this kind of unexpected thing that happens, and it's sort of, it's almost against everything that Greenberg was talking about. Like, it wouldn't have been allowed, and for me as I feel like as the viewer, that opens up a kind of breathing space in looking at the paintings that's so essential for the evolution of your work.
So yeah, I think it has to do with a willingness, perhaps, to keep things open, in the play of it coming together. So not taking my little plans and schemes too seriously while I'm working. Being, if something fortuitous happens, then make it work.
Yeah, we all benefit from not taking
I mean, I think of this painting and this painting behind me as being sort of, in many ways, overtly figurative, in spite of the, it's not just drapes of fabric. It could be that too, but this figure on the right in both cases, this has a sort of pointed bottom like the Venus de Milo, but this has an open bottom like a kind of stance. I think of them as sort of relating, again, this is after the observation of it happening with the colors. There's a kind of archaic figure that emerges in a kind of demonic sort of way. And I'm very open to that. You know, I never thought of myself as a figurative, I mean, I studied figurative painting. My first teacher was a guy named Paul Warner from the Bay Area Figurative School. But I've always been thinking about, you know, modernist abstraction. Since a great encounter with an Arthur Dove show in 1978 or something at SF MoMA. Actually, much earlier. I think it was much earlier. But yeah.
Another thing that happens for me in these vertical paintings that have the kind of folds, and these are very recent paintings for you, right?
Yeah, this is it,
Yeah.
folks.
And what I see happening here is in a certain way, like a lot of things that you've been working with are coalescing in these paintings, and the rhythm that starts to happen from the different, you know, I'm working with harmonic progression, so I'm always looking at things and saying, oh, this distance in relation to this and this and this.
And you work with line more directly in your sketch as a schema, as something that is perceivable.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
But the rhythms that comes out of there, and this, I mean, harmonic progressions, it's music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the kind of resonance that's generated by these lines and the color relationships starts to create almost like a sound that inhabits the room. And I find that really, like, once you're in the room with them and you can kind of quiet yourself down, you know, it's like they step out and, you know, and there they are with you, and you feel like all these different subtle vibrations coming out of the painting. And that for me is very special to like hone your ability with color and shape and proportion to the point where you can actually create resonances that are that specific, that are that palpable.
Well, thank you. The last 4 years since the last show, you know, with COVID, Daisy and I have been like consolidating our lives together through each of us selling our individual houses and moving in together and building a studio. And working, I've felt utterly unhinged for like the last 4 years from theory or from the support of the grid as a kind of comic structure. Amy Silman once said, at the time, I think it was around 2005, she wrote a sentence in a catalog essay she wrote, which I think is for the time was the most wonderful thing that had ever been said about my paintings, because of the memory of paintings in the painting. And this is like my support structure is the memory of these paintings. This is why I'm bringing it up. Which is something like Stephen positively glowed when I suggested that his paintings were paintings of paintings, the exact size of the painting being made. And I did positively glow, and then I glowed when I read that sentence because it was like superimposition, 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 and it's I don't see. I mean, that painting, the tall grass, that sort of the taller painting in the middle there, did come to me in a dream. So paintings still come to me in dreams and stuff, but I don't see paintings as whole prior to the act as I used to, for the most part. And
I think that's a good sign.
yeah. So there's a lot of accidental things happen.
I was thinking of the artists that came to my mind when I was walking around, my first view of your show, and of course Harriet Corman is is big, and
We shared a gallery together at Leonard Weinberg for many, many years, yeah.
and the colors are, you know, I think if you put the paintings together, you can see how different the colors are. But in memory, the intensity of the color relationships are so similar. Not that the colors are similar, that it brings her to mind, but also I was thinking of Jacob Lawrence when in looking at these paintings, and that kind of surprised me because, but it was really palpable for me in the room when I was first looking, and also of Al Heltz when I was thinking about these like slices and the folds in your paintings, because those, I'm sure you know these paintings very well, those black and white constructions he made in the late 60s.
And prior to that, the alphabet paintings and the big, like Greek Garden, which is a painting that was at SF MoMA, and I grew up with it. So yeah, Al Hell is definitely in the background. Those paintings had drips, and I felt I had to get rid of the drips. You know, by around, I don't know, by the early aughts, the drips were mostly gone. And as far as Jacob Lawrence goes, I mean, well, he's just fantastic painter, and his finding figuration in the plane, finding the plane in figuration is just one of the great sort of formal and narrative achievements, you know, coming out of modernist work. So you go to MoMA and you see the Migration series, and I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that this gallery has Jacob Lawrence paintings coming through every now and then, and I feel it's a great thing to rest on.
Maybe it's the way the figures are starting to emerge that made me think of Jacob Lawrence.
I think the emergence is,
Yeah.
I think you're not wrong.
That was such a beautiful.
Of course, I'm making bigger paintings than, you know, as objects than would tend to.
But in memory, they
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they're monumental. Yeah.
So, but you know, I wonder if I was going to ask you if there were artists for whom your experience with their work might be more buried or less obvious than these visual similarities that one can pick up on immediately.
A lot of Renaissance painting. I think a lot of Fra Angelico, and I think a lot about Piero. I think a lot about icon painting. I've said before that one of the interesting things about adequately applied color to planar shapes is that color is both infinitely recessive and totally forward at the same time. And I really believe that the icon painters, to misquote John Berger, were painting in a world suffused by it was an apocalyptic presence of the eternal and the infinite, saturated in the divine, you could say. And in that, the nature of infinity is that, like Zeno's paradox, it's as close to us as it is far away. So when you look at color with the density, say, of looking into a stick of butter, it's both beyond distant, like beyond gone, and totally crashing through the wall. And so I think about icon space, which is much more diverse and warped when you start looking at, particularly its emergence into, say, early Renaissance painting, like the Sienese painters. There's all kinds of weird angles and expressive stretchings that go on that are not of the classical order. So, but then the interior, the restorative geometries inside Piero's figurative paintings. We were just looking at Piero yesterday, Daisy and I, and at the Frick, and feeling the architecture once again, and that shadowed step sort of has a has a memory of on the lower left-hand corner of the big Piero that's at the Frick, there's this shadowed step.
Oh,
I haven't thought about it in 20 years.
But you know it well.
Yeah, yeah. And Daisy pointed it out, so I was like, whoa.
I just
So, yeah, so that's me, and I think of Fra Angelico a lot. And there's a wonderful book by Didi Uberman on Fra Angelico figuration and dissemblance, which gets into this idea of materiality, both being prophetic and being totally incarnate at the same time. So how can something be incarnate and also a prophecy? You know, that duplicity of painting, that paradox of painting is something that's very close to me.
My mother took me to see the Fra Angelico Annunciation in Florence when I was 14. And, you know, it just, I mean,
Tears shot from my eyes
I
the
mean,
first time I
you
saw
know,
it.
it's
Yeah.
like amazing. I've been back to see it several times. But I just want to mention something I think would be of interest to you, and that is, we share a student, A.B. Ryan.
Who I wrote one of the most brilliant things that's ever been written about my work.
Ditto.
But I think you helped her with it, or that was, yeah, she's brilliant.
Probably not. Maybe I looked it over before she sent it in, but she wrote a piece about it was actually about my work, but she went and made this incredible study of the icons and how they use reverse perspective that has to do with
That came into her writing about my piece too, yeah.
That was, so you know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
brilliant.
Really great.
Is she standing there over there? Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah, you can chase her down.
Thank you, Andy, for all your contributions. Okay, so, you know, I just have a few more questions. One of them is, speaking that we're talking about teaching, but what do you feel like you've gained from your teaching and writing about other people's work for your own practice?
Well, that was a nice segue because we talked about Dear A.B. Well, I think teaching I've just retired.
Yes.
And I'm a professor emeritus
Yeah.
at Rutgers, and I also had a long association with the Bard MFA program and a long association with SVA before that, before going to Rutgers. Bard thing bridged both. Teaching has been really important. I have a former student sitting in the front row here. There's other it's sort of what it didn't get me up in the morning, but it made it impossible to go to bed at night. particularly with the advent of email. Even now I'm thinking about former students and sending them emails about who they should be looking at and blah blah blah. Because it's a way of talking to myself, talking to them. Have you noticed? And also rereading texts that so I've taught the D.D. Uberman book many times and Berger and looking at the Overlook, the great Norman Bryson book. There's certain texts that you revisit like old friends, and it's for the students, but I'm always finding new stuff in them and a mode of rhetoric maybe. So.
I love seeing paintings and thinking of some student that has to see this painting.
Absolutely.
And I photograph them and send them to.
Yeah.
And it's just part of your life.
We don't let go. Yeah. I'm like a helicopter teacher.
In your interview with John Yowds, like 20 years ago on the rail, you gave this beautiful soliloquy on your commitment to painting and the practice of painting. Do you remember that?
I remember vaguely saying I was a lifer.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a lifer.
Would you? So I read that before, to interview you, of course. So I just wondered if you would say the same thing today. How would you articulate your commitment to painting?
it's not like I got up before a magistrate and said, you know, I do.
I do so.
And it's not onomerta either. I think it's more like I don't know. I keep thinking about reincarnation when I come back as a painter. And someone asked Georgia O'Keeffe, you know, why do you paint? She said, I can't sing. And I totally understand that because I can't sing, and I bet if I could sing, and I play piano badly, I don't have the time to devote to piano that I have to devote to painting, because painting is something immediate, even when it's in its early morning face stages, and it's not looking like it's going to look. I kind of know when it's going to, you know, that's going to get there, and you know, I hate not being in the studio. Is that a commitment? I don't. It's like it's a draw. It draws me in. It draws me on. It's really more like it. And then I keep thinking like, well, maybe I'll come back as a poet. I don't have time. I was a literature major in college. And, you know, I didn't know you could go to school being a painter, and I wanted being both because literature had a faint whiff of scholarship for my parents, even though it was the equal ticket to poverty. But I don't have time to read as much as I should if I was going to be a poet or a literature major, and I don't understand poetry the way I understand painting. I understand rhythm in planes more than I understand rhythm in speech. I possess some rhythm in speech rhetorically, and that's from all the reading I've done, but it's accidental.
How do you think your move outside of New York has affected your work? I mean, what has it given you?
That's partly what the show is referencing. I think there's a great internet meme on Instagram of like soccer announcers going like calling a play and then all flinching back going, whoa. And it's like, and then it was published as 50-year-olds looking at the bird feeder. And I think that, you know, there's turkeys in our yard, there's birds, there's cardinals, and cardinals, they all sit in the tree in the wintertime, and it's like Christmas ornaments.
Do you listen to the sound?
Absolutely.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and then when it stops, like on the summer solstice, it converts almost immediately to crickets and cicadas. Like they become louder than the birds. The birds quiet down. They're doing whatever they need to do with their families and stuff, and they're not jabbering. I mean, we have a jay who polices everything, but the mockingbird you don't hear as much, for instance. And they're like great jazz musicians, mockingbirds. So the insects, it's like the creatures of the night, they're wonderful too. So it's the whole oral audio, you know, the sound of being in nature. It's not quiet, it's like outside your window screaming all day long. And that's, you know, it's immersive.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I find it often very hard to come back to New York where those sounds aren't there, and that's for me one of the real hard, it's dead.
But there's all this art and doctors, art and doctors. That's what you get to be like over 70 art and doctors. You come down and you go, okay, that was great, I'm out. Want to check out? Great, that's it. Yeah, okay, back up to, you know.
Okay, here's my last question for you. There's a sense of like this new focus on abstraction, like abstraction's back. Like it's been back so many times in our lifetime already. I'm wondering how you think about these kinds of cyclical changes between whatever figuration and abstraction, sculpture and painting, whatever it is. How do you find yourself navigating those?
I don't think it's a football game, like we're going to rise up in the fourth quarter and kill those guys. You know, I think it's like there are narratives and then there are narratives. Figuration sort of demands a kind of surface narrative that in less restrained hands maybe comes closer to illustration. But I've seen a lot of bad abstract paintings that have no sense of that embodied presence of the rectangle, or the non-rectangle. So it's not really, in all the things that we've just been talking about, all those references, there's narrative. So there are narratives, plurality, and so I think it would be very difficult to walk around this room without, a room without chairs and a bunch of people in it, and look at all the work and think, well, he's just all over the place. I don't think so. I think there's like a sense of concentration, a sense of an aesthetic that's fairly focused, but it hasn't squeezed out those pluralities. It admits those pluralities in doses that are tolerable to sensitive people like me. I say that with dewy eyes.
Thank you. Should we ask?
Yeah.
Ask a question? Yeah.
Mary?
Yeah, I love what you were saying earlier about this kind of, the triangle and the percussive energy that you can create with it. And of course, I immediately go to jazz. And it doesn't sound like that's super important to you, but I was just curious if you have a relationship with that form.
This is dedicated to Wayne Shorter, and it's named Juju, which is the title of a great record of Wayne Shorter, the cover of which gave me the title for The Tall Grass, which is that painting in the center, because it shows Wayne against a bunch of tall grasses. And I think a lot about the harmonies of jazz. There's a chord called the suspended fourth that you play with a flat ninth, which is really a half step up from the root of that chord that has this very dark minor energy, but it's also very open and luscious. And that kind of feeling is something that I think I relate to some of the colors I'm using a lot. So yes, I think about jazz, I think about French Impressionist composers, and I have there's this singer named Lucia Pop who died way too young, Viennese opera, light opera singer, had the most beautiful voice, and there's a wonderful artist, dancer, choreographer named Madeline Hollander, who went to Bard, who I share synesthesia with. We had big arguments over what the color, what the number 5 tastes like, for instance. She's all wrong about that. But I sent her a long thing about Lucia Pop. I said, you've got to hear Lucia Pop. She's like cream. And I get sometimes choked up when I hear her sing Strauss or something. So I think a lot about music all the time. Jazz is very present to me. What's called jazz. So somebody had their hand up back there. Yes.
Just thought on a couple of things. First of all, I'm reminded to come in here of you were in Rome for a while of the Fukmauno group with Orazio and Accardi and I see it right here, which was a way of introducing formalism as a fight against fascism, and they were really purists in that way. The other thing, though, that you mentioned icons, and those guys, there's this beautiful word called akiriopoiesis, which is made by the hand of God, not by the hand of man. And those guys were so careful not to show a stroke, because that would humanize them.
Oh, they were terrible, yes. And the church fathers who were overseeing that painting were adamant about not admitting contemporary hairstyles into the saints or donors that were depicted, because that would open things up to contemporaneity. That would just like open the door to, they saw what was coming. So the question of like, it's like not admitting, not admitting, and like, and you know, what a fraught decision that is for the individual in the studio, then and now, it's still an issue, I think. Oh, everybody just take a look at Medry's socks. I just want to.
Oh my God.
Well, I have two questions. One is that, I mean, it's been interesting to sit here for so long, be studying this painting and that painting, and just going back and forth while you were talking. And I was thinking that, you know, every single painting is a proposal of some kind. And I was agreeing with what you were saying, that it's strange how, in some ways now, you kind of, it's like a sort of a little, it's tricksterish, like, oh, I could go through there, like that's a way through, but then it isn't. And like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that painting would be so different if that green wasn't right there. It's almost like, it could be almost like a sour note, or not a sour note, but sort of like, I got you, you can't get out of here. Like it kind of keeps you engaged, and then you're kind of flipping back and forth. And the other thing I was thinking about was, you know, they're so impeccably made. It's like the color goes all the way through. It's like, it doesn't, it's not, it's like that conundrum again about like frontal but spaced at the same time. And I was thinking, do you ever destroy things? Do you ever really fuck it up?
Yes, and there's things that just don't work, increasingly so, I think. As, Daisy can tell you, I am not an impeccable guy. And I could finish these quicker, but I can't. Yeah. I think maybe 3 coats. No, it's not going to do it.
But is this where the architecture, your interest in architecture comes through? Because it seems like you can't really, I can't really look at this work the same way as I looked at your work like 15 years ago or something. I feel like it's kind of more argumentative. You know, I mean, not.
I hope it doesn't grab you by the lapel.
No, not in a bad way, but it refuses to resolve. But I think in a good way.
Yeah.
You know.
I'd like to think that there was certain things going on in the work. Like all my work has had some sort of thing that wasn't resolvable. I'd like to think that when even the concentric rectangular bands had a figure ground reversal that became like magic eye almost. Like you could get really freaked out in front of them. And so it's sort of like an analogy would be a Navajo weaver leaving a soul line in the weaving for the design to escape. There's like some elemental unresolvability built into each thing. I think it's like maybe a little more overt now.
I think so.
And that may have to do with the openness of the diagonals to like sort of movement and, you know, and this kind of spatiality that Joan is referring to. Possibly. But I mean, I sense it. And I, you know, your description of like not getting, do I stay or do I go? I feel that in front of every painting when I'm working on them. It's not, the draw is still there, so it continues.
So how do you know they're finished?
When they're like end to end, top to bottom, full at a certain level. Just, you know, that I can't do anything more to it. At that, there's a certain level, like I can't put another coat on, and the coat would just like start to peel off on a certain level, or something, some level of saturation is reached. It's in, you know, it's not an exact science. Stop. The opening is supposed to start, so this went on. So, yeah.
We have refreshments on the second floor, and if anyone would like a catalog, you're welcome to take one. Everyone who attended the conversation, and then we'll. And also, there's a Jacob Lawrence hanging downstairs, which has a lot of diagrams.
Yeah.